Hello and welcome to episode number 6 of the Guitar Hang Podcast. I'm your host, John Stancourt. Today's guest is legendary guitarist Frank Marino. Frank is a guitar hero's guitar hero, inspiring guitar legends including but not limited to Zakk Wylde, Joe Bonnamassa, Paul Gilbert, Frank Hannon, Vinnie Morre, and Eric Gales. Guitar Player magazine calls Frank a full-spectrum guitar god alongside of Jeff Beck, Van Halen, and The Edge.
Right. You know, then you start to dislike that form of it.
Right.
So yeah, I could make a list of the stuff that didn't thrill me more than the stuff that did, because most stuff did. Most stuff had some good stuff in it. Jazz, blues, pop, ballads, hard rock, metal. There's always something to get. Like, metal's a great example. Metal is the type of music that I love to play guitar on. But man, I wish the Cookie Monster wouldn't be singing.
Right.
You know?
Right.
With the Cookie Monster vocals, it's like there's always that one thing about something that I don't like, you know?
Right.
It's not to say it's bad.
Right.
There's nothing bad about it. It's just, it's actually quite good. It's well done.
Right. Well, it seems like the beginning of your career coincided with the advent of what most people would refer to as metal.
Yeah, I mean, at one point people thought I was metal.
Right.
So, I did a song called Juggernaut, which sounds a little more metalish,
Right.
And even early on, I did stuff, really heavier drop. Don't forget, I was playing in drop C sharp before I ever made an album, and before I knew that it was cool to do it.
Yeah, which predated that whole Seattle thing, which was
Yeah, from 1968 till 1972, 71, 72, my guitar was always tuned 3 semitones lower.
Yeah.
When I did Maxoom, I had to tune up simply because they said there's going to be a guy playing a blues song with you on your record, and he has a piano.
Right.
So you need to tune to the piano. And I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
I mean, I hadn't tuned down like that because it was some cool thing. I tuned down like that because I thought it sounded cool, and it was easier for me to sing, which I wasn't a really good singer.
Right.
So I like to play in the key of E on a guitar, the E string.
Sure.
And so in concert pitch, the key of E is too high for me. I should be playing like down lower than that because of my voice.
Right.
So I just say, I know what to do. Like if I tune the guitar lower, then I can play in the key of E, which it's not really the key of E anymore. It's E on the guitar, but it's C sharp on a piano,
You can definitely get interesting.
So you're down 3 semitones and everything's all right, and you do all your songs that way, and then you go to make an album. And of course, the tuning suffers because you have really light strings.
Right.
And down low like that, they're like ridiculous, hardly keeping tune,
Right. Well,
and so I start tuning up a little, and found it harder to play. That the guitar was tighter, it was harder to bend,
Right.
But you kind of get used to it, and you figure, well, why not? And I stayed there, But then later on, all those years later, people were saying, "Oh man, drop D, man. We're tuned down to D. We're tuned down to C," and I'm like, "That's not new."
Right. Yeah, I mean, you get a lot of really cool overtones when you're tuned like that. Some really...
Sure. I'll tell you something very interesting about that. Some people think it doesn't matter, that it is what it is, but if there's anybody out there that appreciates jazz or symphonic music, they'll know that if you write a tune or you play a song that was arranged and written in a specific key, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it sounds really cool. If you simply take that song and transpose it down 2 semitones or 3 semitones, but keep the chord shapes the same, it's like it sounds awful. The same song sounded good sounds awful. You have to invert the chords.
Yeah.
You have to literally play a different inversion of the chords if you want that to be the next chord in the song. Because if you play the original inversion that you did when it was tuned up, it now, the harmonic distortion created by this new version of the chord is totally wrong for the arrangement.
Does it have something to do with the overtone series as you tune down?
I do. Yeah, I believe that. Yes, I don't just believe that; it does.
Yeah.
You know, because we consider the tunings of instruments as, you know, in numbers of 1, 3, 5. You know,
right.
1, 4, 5. We're thinking of it like that, right? Fifths,
Right.
fourths, thirds, major thirds, minor thirds,
Right.
flat fives, sevenths, sharp nines. We think of it like that. But if you think about that, that's a relationship. When we describe that, we're describing a relationship between two tones.
Right.
It's not a real thing. It's just a relationship. It's like saying, you know, a person. My father is my father. To me, he's related as a father, but to him, I'm related as a son. Right? So it's a different relationship when you look at it in two different directions.
Yeah, it's the difference between if the note goes up a fourth, it's real, but it's that same note an octave lower as the fifth.
So, but because they're relationships, you have to say to yourself, well, we're judging that based on a 12-note system, right?
Right.
Right? Like there's 12 notes that we use in our version of music. There's 12 notes to an octave, right? But the word octave, right?
Yeah.
In mathematical theory, is a doubling. So if you play an A440, you know, the tuning fork, A440,
Yeah.
the octave below that is 220 hertz.
Yeah.
It's half. And below that is 110 hertz. So you have a decimal system of 10 between the octave, but notes are 12.
Right.
We've divided what should be a 10 system into a 12 system.
Right.
So naturally, mathematically, the difference between 70% of 10 and 70% of 12
Yeah.
is going to make a different harmonic distortion between the tones, and that's added in. So when you play two tones, if you were to take a perfect oscillator that would give you, 100 hertz and 200 hertz, and play them together, you should be hearing an octave sound, like two notes singing in an octave.
Right.
But the juxtaposition of those two tones is going to create a phantom set of third tones.
Yeah.
There's going to be another one. And usually, in the case of, let's say, we were playing a guitar, how does somebody tune a guitar before he knows how to play? He basically he's told, well, press the 5th fret on your B string and play your open E and tune the open E until it stops, until the speeding up noise slows down, and then it's the same, right? You're hearing a beating sort of sound. And you'll hear dee-dee, and you hear whoa, 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 until you get the string in there, right?
Right.
But those modulations that you're hearing that are slowing down could be described as a frequency, meaning they're happening this frequently. So the juxtaposition of two higher frequencies, in this case the E and the open E, are creating a phantom low frequency between them if they're not perfectly tuned.
Right.
And think about all of the different frequencies going on in a song or an instrument when you play a chord. There's not just two notes beating against each other. There's millions that are creating phantom frequencies by the very nature that you're putting two together. It's creating like a child frequency that wasn't there. It wasn't one of the things you played. But it does get blended into the sound, and that affects what we call the character or the tonal quality of the music, right?
Yeah.
So, like I say, when you start dividing that into the 10 versus 12 system, and you arranged your chord as a C sharp 9, whatever, on certain portion of the guitar, and then you decide to play that same shape 5 frets down without changing the shape or the positional sensing, you're going to get a different feeling from that chord than when you play 5 frets up. And people notice that already when they used, in the old days, they would use capos, right? So most songs were done in the key of C or G or D in the first position. And then they say, well, I want to play it in a different key, but I don't want to play it in a different shape. So they would put a capo on the 5th fret and then still play the C, G, and D positions in that position, right?
Right, yeah.
And the song sounds totally different.
Exactly.
Okay?
Yeah.
People often say, I'm going to play Here Comes the Sun by the Beatles, that typical, Here Comes the Sun.
Yep.
And they'll play it in first position on an open string guitar, but actually it's done on a higher capoed guitar.
Yeah, the 7th fret.
It doesn't really sound like Here Comes the Sun until you use the capo.
Yeah, I know. It's same thing with Hotel California and all. Yeah, you're right.
Sure. Blackbird has to be done from the first position. Try putting a capo and playing Blackbird. It sounds like you're playing for the King of England at dinner. It doesn't sound the same.
Right.
It sounds like minstrel music.
Yeah.
So the character of sound is what I'm all about.
Right.
Tone, sound. It's why I build amps. It's why I build pedals.
Right.
I build them because of sound, and I believe that what I'm giving to people, I play notes, and yes, I play guitar and whatever, but that's ancillary to the fact that I'm making sounds. I have to play guitar in order to make sound.
Right.
But I used to be a drummer, and so you can make sounds with drums too,
Right.
Same artist making different sounds.
Yeah.
So sound is really important. I find that that's lost. Remember when I said they used to be concerts, then they became shows?
Yeah.
People forgot about the importance of the sound, and they started looking at the visuals.
Yeah,
and then when they couldn't see the visuals because they were too far back, they started giving them television screens to watch it on.
Yeah.
While the band plays.
I think these days for the average guitarist, there's so many options that it's harder to find a singular voice, because a lot of the sounds that guitar players tend to choose are a bit homogeneous, or they find sounds that sound really good in their bedroom or in their rehearsal room, but when you start playing with the band, some of those frequencies get swallowed up by the other instruments. So it's harder to be a unique voice on the instrument these days, because there's so many choices, and a lot of those choices are very easy to mask your individual identity.
Right, and when modeling amps came out, that was like the worst that you could have.
Right.
Because the modeling amplifier, or the modeling pedal, take the original, I think Line 6 was one of the first people to come out with that, right? It sounds like a Fender Tweed. Oh, or it sounds like a Bassman, or it sounds like a Twin, right?
Right.
But and it does. When you're playing it through a small speaker system, like you're going to record it or whatever, you say, it does sound like kind of like a Marshall or a Tweed or a Fender, right? But as soon as you use that sound in conjunction on, let's say you go to do an overdub on a 24-track machine where you have recorded a real set of drums, a real piano, a real instrument, and now you're trying to do your overdub against that, all of a sudden it sounds like a kazoo. It's tiny.
Yeah.
Because they can model the character of the amp or the character of the instrument. But the character is not the sound. The character is the fingerprint that runs along the sound.
Right.
The looping, I call it the looping fingerprint.
Yeah.
And every guitar player knows, that a Stratocaster has a very specific sound, and you can recognize it in the record. You know when a guy's, he's playing a Stratocaster, got a certain sound to it, character to it. And you can't miss it, whether it's, the Doobies playing Long Time Running, or Hendrix, or Stevie Ray go, oh yeah, that's a Strat, right? That tone that a Strat has.
Right.
That other guitars don't have. You can't, Les Pauls don't have them, right?
Yeah.
So everyone knows that character, right?
Yeah.
And it's a very nice character for a certain kind of music. So how come we can recognize that Strat, whether we're playing it on a little plastic AM radio or in a giant sound system? Why does it always sound like a Strat, no matter how loud or low? Even if we remove all the bass control, we drop the bass and boost the treble on an EQ, we still a Strat character with less bass and more treble, but the character's the same. And that's what they model. They model the character of the amplifier. What they don't model, and in fact can't model, is the power.
Right.
So even if it's a loud version of the modeling amp played through the PA, that's the power's being added afterwards through the PA, the volume, if you want to call it that. But in a genuine tube amplifier, if you build tube amplifiers, you understand that the power supplies of these amplifiers are moving huge amounts of voltage. So 450, 500, 600 volts on the plates of the tubes that are all eventually coming to a big transformer and making the speaker move, right?
Yeah.
You may still turn it down and not be loud, but you're not turning down the power. The power is still 450 volts. That's powering everything.
Right.
So what's on tap is like saying you have a big dam blocking the ocean. Now, you may only turn on the tap to get you a glass of water, but there's a dam behind it.
Right.
There's a lot of power behind it.
Yeah.
It's called potential. And when you build a pedal that's trying to model something that had a dam behind it, but you're powering it with a 9-volt battery, you are not really creating the potential voltage that it had when it was invented.
Yeah.
The swing of volts is just 9 volts. And that's why so many pedals, when you see the guys building the pedals now with the 18 volts, this will run on 18 or 9,
Mm-hmm.
And they say, but if you run it on 18, it's going to sound a bit cleaner. And they're right, because it's got more headroom before it clips.
Yeah.
So there's something to building amplifiers and pedals that to create a certain amount of reality to them in the analog world. But the character of what you are now amplifying is something else altogether.
Yeah.
Your voice has a very specific character called the fingerprint of who you are. Someone walks in the room and you're blindfolded, you go, oh, that's Bob, or that's Joe. There's a character to his voice that you recognize.
Right.
But if that same guy were to talk over a gigantic microphone in a hall, you'd also say, that's Bob.
Right, yeah.
Right? So that character is what we think is the sound, but it's actually the recognizableness of it.
Are there any...
So a band,
Yeah.
a record, a producer, let's say records produced by Bob Rock or records produced by some other famous producer, Mutt Lange, or they have a certain character to them. And that's that producer. It's very, very rare that you'll get a producer who can produce two different things that are so different that he stays away from his habits that you can't tell it's the same guy.
Yeah.
I, as a producer, try to do that. So I occasionally produce stuff for others. I don't do it as a job, but I do it once in a while because I like something. So if I might do a metal band, I might do a jazz group, but I guarantee you, if you hear the 2-3 different productions I did, you'll never believe it's the same producer. Because I purposely say I'm not going to use what I knew worked for that guy.
Right.
I'm going to find a new way to give it a different character. So I'm thinking right now of actually building and putting out on the market my amplifier, my pedals, all the stuff that make me have the tone I have, and seeing if people like them. Maybe there's some guitar players out there that will like to have this kind of stuff.
What would be...
my DVD is a great example of the character of my amplifier, the tone of my amplifier.
What would be a few pedals that you're specifically that you would like to get out there that you've had a
Well,
lot of success with?
obviously, the easiest one to start with is the distortion.
Yeah.
Overdrive, distortion, gain pedal, which is really 90% of what I'm using all night. If you look at the DVD that we have out live at the Agora, you'll notice I'm 99% of the time I'm standing in the middle of the stage at my microphone. I'm not over at my pedal board.
Yeah.
And so I'm doing 90% of my tone simply with turning it up or turning it down.
Which that in and of
Once
itself
in a while, I'll run over and turn on the fuzz to do my bombs or whatever. But I was thinking of just that system that I use, as I invented it. I'm thinking, well, I wonder if other guitar players would like to have this.
Yeah. That in and of itself, controlling your tone and the way that your pick attack, the way you angle the pick, whether you're using fingers and pick or hybrid picking or just, there's so many tactile ways and so many adjustments that you can make that have nothing to do with the pedal.
But I did try, like I have a rhythm guitar player, right? So often have a different guitar player in my band with me. Occasionally, I wanted to know as a builder, right, how much of a part of it does it play?
Yeah.
How much of a part in my tone is because of my pick attack, my hands, my habits, right?
Yeah.
I know it does play a part, but I want to know to what degree. So I would ask the other guy, whenever I'd have a rhythm player, I'd have had many different ones. I'd say, at sound check, I'd say, you want to play through my system, please? Like, come over and play through my amp for a while.
Yeah.
And I'd listen to it. Because he's a totally different player playing through my pedals.
Right.
And it didn't really get that far away from my tone. The only thing that I could say was different was his choice of lines, his choice of licks. But I wouldn't say that, oh my God, all of a sudden it's a different amp.
Right.
It's not.
Right.
So it does play a part, but I think some people make too much out of that statement. Oh, it's in the hands, it's in the fingers. It is, but not to 100% degree.
Right.
It's nuanced.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it is, exactly what you say, nuance. Are there particular, if somebody had not heard your guitar playing before, what are some of the things that you would say that would be unique to your playing that maybe things
I think
that you...
the one thing that makes me the most unique of myself, I mean most meaning of on a good day, is because I tend to combine very opposite styles in the same solo or in the same go.
Right.
I play what would be metal rock plus jazz plus blues. Now, blues you expect to be melded with rock.
Yeah.
Jazz you don't. And I'm not talking crazy jazz. I'm talking swing jazz. I'm talking bebop.
Right.
So you don't just necessarily expect that. So the blend, and those things are intertwined in my style. I'm not purposely saying, I think I'll play a jazz line now. It's not
right.
what I do.
Right.
It's just there's a combinational aspect to what I do. When I do a blues tune, for instance, whether it's my version of Red House or King Bee or you name it, even going way back into the 70s, people would say, oh, I love your version of King Bee when you do these lines at the jazz chords and blah, 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 and one of those lines. But that's just my combinational thinking. It's not like I'm saying, gee, look how cool this is, I'm going to put jazz into a blues tune. That's just the way I'm thinking.
Yeah, right.
So that probably is unique because I really don't see a whole lot of other rock guitar players do that. And especially the more pentatonic players. And then you get the other good rock guitar players that are what we call neoclassical. So they're really into the whole Paganini and whatever, the minor scales and doing things quickly. You never see the jazz lines from them. And their rock lines are usually very pentatonic, so their combinational is when they play rock, they play pentatonic, and when they play neoclassical, they don't use any pentatonic at all, right?
Yeah.
But you rarely see them doing what I call spelling out chord changes that aren't there.
Right.
Right? So passing chords.
Right.
But you don't have to actually play the passing chord. If you're playing lead, you don't have to play the passing chord between two other chords. You can spell it out on your way there, and you've made the person feel like that chord was there for a split second.
Yeah.
And that's what jazz guys do. That's essentially what jazz guys do. They're always spelling out the passing chords. But they do that because the whole reason they do that is different than you would think. They do it because they're copying the horn players.
Yeah.
And the horn players do it because they can't play chords.
Right, exactly. So they're having to spell it out rather than, it makes sense.
Right. Horn players spell out the chord changes. Guitar players can do either spell them or play them as chords, and so can piano players. But because horns are monophonic instruments, those horn players had to learn how to play their horn by spelling chord changes. Right?
Right. Yeah.
So guitar is able to do both. And the funny thing about it is when the guitar players are in a band where the horn players are usually the lead players in jazz, the guitar guy gets his break. Think about the swing bands. The guitar guy, he's mostly chomping the chords.
Yeah, the
when he gets his break, he tries to do what the sax player did. He tries to do what the clarinetist did. He's trying to copy his horn player. He doesn't really have to, but he's trying to because he thinks it sounds more like the music. And so do the scat singers. When you see the singers in jazz, scat singing, they're imitating saxophones and clarinets, and they're spelling out all these lines, doo-wop-a-doo-wop-a-doo-wop, ba-da-doo-ba-doo-ba-ba-doo-ba, So my approach to music is really about, it happens to be guitar, but I'm that way when I play the drums, so if I'm playing the drums, I'm trying to spell out the rhythms, without necessarily keeping just to one beat. And I think it's a very refreshing way to do it because it doesn't get stale.
Yeah, there's a lot to be said.
When you try to stick to one kind of music, you're really limiting yourself to one thing, and then you're talking yourself into believing that that's the only thing that matters. Truth of the matter is, every musician I know, even if they're not good at a certain kind of music, would love to be able to do it.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's because it's not getting, you're playing a lot more free if you're just incorporating your things that you're feeling at the time that you're feeling them and being able to execute ideas that you might hear in your head.
Yeah. And really, it's really important to me that I'm able to have an idea in my head and it should be able to instantly come out on my hand. I would hate to have an idea in my head and then have to figure it out on my fretboard.
Yeah.
Because by that time you forgot the idea. You get so many wrong notes, you forgot the idea.
Right.
So it's important to me that if I get an idea, it better translate pretty quickly to the fretboard. The same way if I get an idea for a word, it translates to my tongue.
Right.
I don't have to figure out how to shape my tongue to say a word that popped into my head.
Right. And
and a good conversation, as opposed to a monologue or whatever, a good conversation is when ideas occur to you and you start forming sentences to express what your original idea was. Your original idea wasn't the words you said. your original idea was, how about a better windshield wiper? Like you're thinking about, boy, this is smearing. And then your sentence might be, if we took rubber and we put it on blah, 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 the whole sentence comes from the original idea, but you're forming the words based on the inspiration of the idea.
Right.
Music is the same way. It's a conversation. So if I get a musical idea, it's not just a musical idea for a line, it's a musical idea for a feeling, and then you begin to play all the little words that would inject that feeling into the music.
Yeah.
But there has to be a connection between your mind and your hand in order to do that. Otherwise, you'd be very frustrated. And the proof is this. Take the most formidable guitar player that can play anything, okay? Tommy Emmanuel, okay? Really, really fantastic player. Probably the best in the world. And he's doing it on an acoustic guitar. And suddenly, with all those fantastic abilities and fantastic ideas, turn his guitar around left-handed and say, now play it.
Right.
The ideas didn't go away. The inspirations didn't go away. You can try this at home. Take your guitar, flip it around the other way. You haven't lost your ideas. You haven't lost your musicianship. You haven't lost your anything. You haven't lost your inspirations. They're all still there, but your hand's not doing it.
Right. Yeah.
What, are you a worse musician now? No. You're the same musician. You just don't have the connection.
Yeah.
So it's like saying you have the same amplifier as it was yesterday, but it's not plugged in.
Right.
And that's the proof.
Yeah.
That's like, really, provable that the same brain, the same musician, the same thing that makes you, I love that guy, he's a fantastic, what a genius, right?
Mm-hmm.
But we're basing that on the total that we're hearing from him and seeing. But if you change one thing about his, about the things that make him that genius, if you limit his thinking, all of a sudden he's not a genius. If you limit his hand, all of a sudden he's not a genius. There's many things that go into why we call him that. So he's still the same guy with all the same inspirations and creativity and everything. But if you say to him, I'm sorry now, try to play it left-handed, unless he takes a lot of time to learn how to do that, you're going to think he's a totally different person.
Right.
You're not privy to what's in his head. He can't get it out of his head.
In your formulative...
Isn't it like that for everything?
Right. Were there any in your formulative years? Was there a lot of time spent learning lines, learning tunes, learning chords?
No, that's particularly why I have this idea, because I was lucky, I guess you'd call it fortunate. The way I started playing guitar, my mind was completely blown. And I didn't even know I was playing. So my mind was very open at 13, 14, because of an incident in the hospital. But, so to me, I never knew another way. My earliest playing on a guitar was that. What do I hear in my head and make my hand do it? It had nothing, I didn't know the names of the notes or the chords or any of that for years after.
So you were able, with very little sitting down and listening and then trying to recreate, you were able to just kind of intuitively know where the connection between the head and the hands, what you could hear.
Well, yeah, let's put it this way. How did you learn to talk? I mean, at some point in your life, before you spoke, you must have still had pictures of food in your mind.
Right.
Or pain in your stomach, okay?
Right.
But you had no word to express that to your parents. You just had, okay?
Right.
Well, some of your ahs meant food, and some of your ahs meant my stomach hurts, right? But in your mind, they were not the same. They were different.
Right.
We were trying to find a way to tell them something. So then you heard them talking, words, you'd hear them talking. And you'd notice that when they said food, that stuff would show up on the table.
Right.
So you'd begin learning that word, food, right? Now you're starting an association with the idea. So you've associated it. Now you had a word to tell them. You've now put a word to the thing. And it's like that if you learn any other language. Go live among the Greeks and you don't speak Greek, or go live among, somebody speaks a different language. You pick it up. They say I picked it up, right? I picked up my French on the street, right? You begin to form those associations. And eventually, you're actually conversing with them. You're conversing in full sentences before you went to school to learn about how to write it down.
Right.
Let alone spell it. So first you converse, then maybe you read, then you write it down, and you spell it. And you get a larger lexicon as you do that. Every human being did that. Every single one, ever. So why not music? Music is a language. It's got an alphabet of 12 notes. You have to form words. You have to form groups and phrases. It's the same thing in a different form.
Right.
So you hear it enough, and you begin to make associations. Oh, those three notes sound sad together, minor chords. Those three notes sound happy together, major chords. I'm going to write happy songs, use major chords. I'm going to write sad songs, maudlin songs. I'm going to use minor chords.
Yeah.
I'm going to write scary songs and use flat five. I now know these things. I didn't know them then. But you knew that if you went down, down, it sounded dangerous.
Right, yeah.
Right? So that's how I learned. My mind was blown on LSD. I was recovering from it, and my world didn't exist. I was living in that weird world for a long time. So all I could do was think about tones and sounds, and there was a guitar, and I'd just find them. But the magic of that is that you never try to find, and you never, in fact, even think up more than you can do anyway. Clinics, tutorials,
Yeah.
You should do those. I'm saying, well, what? I wouldn't know what to do on these things because I'm not doing techniques. I'm not doing something that is do it this way and now practice that. There's no method to my madness. The method is how do you think about it.
Right.
My clinic tutorial would be literally sitting down talking about it like I'm talking to you. Well, that's so boring. Who's going to buy that?
Yeah.
Like who's going to say, hey, I wanted to see the guy do the licks and show me how to do them, But that's not how I approach it. I approach it mentally.
Right. I've probably been to a dozen guitar clinics, and I think in the end, for the most part, it does boil down to what you're describing. I mean, there is a modicum of them being able to play a song and say, okay, well, here's the licks that I used.
Mm-hmm.
But usually, if the guitar clinician in question is articulate, and I think all of them have been, it comes down to what you're saying. It's, well, this was just the way that, I consider, it's what I conceptualized, and I like the way it went together, and I had a tempo in mind, and I had some chord changes in mind, but it was really a means to an end. So unless you're just trying to copy me verbatim, I'm not exactly sure, how this is going to be of service, but, people did find it on some level entertaining. But yeah, I see what you're saying. It's difficult unless you're just really talking about specific licks for somebody to parrot exactly what you're playing.
Right. And so when you think about people learning languages, like, learn Spanish quickly because you're going to Spain and walk around with a little book. Well, the way that the teacher tells you those things on those language learning things is not really the way everyone talks.
Right.
It's like, they talk to you like you're 5 years old, right?
Right.
Well, to me, this is the reason I'm really really dead set against using tablature at the learning stage of guitar.
Yeah.
Tablature is fine for me to use. I don't use it, but for a guy who's done so much for so long, yeah, I could look at a tablature and say, oh, that's how they analyzed it, right?
Yeah.
But to use that when you're in your formative years is the worst thing you can do. Because I think you will end up playing those songs you learned from the tablature. That's true, because you practiced them that way. But you have disconnected your mind and your ear from your hand. And you've connected them to your eyes and your left brain.
Right.
You're forming a synapse between the wrong part of your body. I knew a girl, she was actually the wife of my first drummer, one of my earliest drummers, and she was a concert pianist, really good. And she could not jam with us.
Yeah.
She didn't have the sheet music. She didn't know she couldn't play chopsticks on the piano without sheet music. She had completely formed her association of the piano keyboard with what she saw on a paper, not what she heard. Consequently, a person like that could play a beautiful piece with earplugs in and not have to hear themselves.
Right. Yeah.
But a violinist is different. If he doesn't hear himself, he could play what's on the sheet, and if he doesn't realize that he's playing, because he's got no frets, he'd sound like shit.
Right.
Right? He has to be hearing and minutely tuning every single note as he goes. Even if it's taking a nanosecond, he's tuning it. So it is for the ears. Music is for the ears. So use the ears to learn it.
Yeah.
Food is for the taste and the tongue. Use the tongue to taste it when you're cooking.
Yeah.
A real great chef is... You ask a real great chef, how did you make that sauce? I'm Italian. I make sauce, okay?
Right.
Why is your sauce so good? How much basil did you put? How much salt did you put? You know what they tell you? I don't know. Just put...
Right.
A pinch. What the heck's a pinch? Is it a big pinch, a small pinch? How much? Oh, in the palm of your hand. Boom. Right?
Right.
That's what they'll tell you, these chefs. They're not going to say 1.2 teaspoons. It's salt to taste. You see that oftentimes. Cook 30 minutes and salt to taste.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
So music is the same. How do you salt music to taste? You use your ears, for crying out loud.
Right.
Because it's ear music.
Right.
That's what it's for. It's meant to go in through people's ears, not through their mouth, not
Right.
through their eyes.
Yeah, it's
So
always...
if you begin with the ears and you create with the ears, guess what? It's going to taste good to other ears.
Yeah. Yeah, I've always been fascinated by the way music will strike one person but not the other. I know some of it has to do with, and I'm certainly not a neuroscientist, but it seems like there's some sort of, if at the moment you're receiving music that really moves you, and it's a particular time in your life, it's like there's a particular time stamp to that. Like when I listen to Beach Boys, especially like God Only, anything from Pet Sounds, it takes me back to a time when I first heard it when I was maybe 4 or 5, when it was I was hearing it during I could sense a shift because my parents were getting divorced, but for whatever reason, that music till my deathbed will always have this powerful impact because it's marking a moment in time or something very significant. It was like there was a trauma or maybe a celebratory thing. What moves me about that music is it's beautiful, but it's also very melancholy. And I suspect...
It's the background music of your life.
Yeah.
Now think about this as background music for a second. I happen to like film.
Yeah.
I'm very much a film buff, and I love film. I particularly love, indie films and, films that are done creatively, not necessarily crazy about Hollywood films. how important music is to film, right?
Oh, it's everything.
Alfred Hitchcock at one point decided to make a film with no music. That was The Birds. There's no music in it.
Yeah.
To create a certain feeling, right?
Yeah.
No one ever thought, where's the music? They just knew they had a feeling from the film. No one ever thought there was no music in The Birds until someone told them there wasn't.
Right.
So you can create a feeling with music, or you can create a feeling by the absence of music. The rests are as important as the notes. The timings are as important. The type of instrument is as important. And if the producer is intending to evoke feelings of melancholy or feelings of happiness or feelings of joy or feelings of something because of the picture he's doing,
Right.
he has to have the appropriate music for the scene.
Right.
And oftentimes people say, oh, I saw that movie and I really cried when that thing happened. But what they don't realize is when they cried, there was a certain kind of music going on.
Oh, absolutely. That's
So take a scene that really makes you cry, and just before it happens, start playing the Beverly Hillbillies music, banjo music, and believe me, you're not crying at the scene.
Right, yeah.
Imagine the crucifixion of Jesus
Right.
with banjo music. There's nothing sad about that anymore.
Yeah. When I'm
So
working on
music is very important.
when I'm working on ear training with students, I try to discuss with them about the quality of different chords and the way it makes you feel. I said, if you're learning the modes, the first thing that you really have to do is establish what a Phrygian mode means to you. What is your relationship? Yeah. It feels exotic, but what about it could be used to
Correct.
to make a musical statement? What about the Dorian? You have to first, before you can do anything with this stuff, figure out what it means to you on does it taste good to your palate? Do you like that taste? Just because a guitar player in some magazine said that you've got to learn your modes, that doesn't mean you have to use all. There might be some that you're not attracted to. There's some you may really be attracted to, but you have
to. And it invokes a certain feeling. Like, for instance, 90% of guitar players are playing Dorian stuff if they're not playing pentatonic.
Right.
Okay. Don't even realize it, but they are. Okay.
Yeah.
Their version of A minor is kind of a Dorian sort of, version.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
But if all of a sudden they have to play melodic minor, harmonic minor, or whatever, it's like a little bit strange to them. They don't like to go out of their comfort zone. They say, well, it sounds a bit Spanish or something all of a sudden,
Right.
And they'll tell you that, right? So they'll stick to what they know. But for instance, if you take, Strawberry Fields, or if I did, sometimes you get the Mixolydian in there. Sometimes you get, as you said before, Phrygian. It depends on what the music is and the feeling that it gives you, right?
Right.
I also my mother was Syrian Christian. And so I grew up, without being a musician, just listening to her Arabic records. And they have a very different scale.
Yeah.
So I know that scale very well because it's embedded in my memory as much as any pop music is.
Right.
Right?
Right.
And in that scale, you get to use all 12 notes.
Yeah.
But you just separate them on the way up and you unseparate them on the way down. So you end up using all 12 notes.
Kind of like the 12-tone serialists.
Well, it's not like you're playing semitones. You're playing a semitone, then you skip 2 semitones, you play another pair of semitones. It's like that. Okay, it's almost like diminished scale, but not quite. And so when you do that, you go, oh my God, it sounds very Middle Eastern. Well, of course it does. Because it is. That's what they do. That's a whole other mode. And by the way, that is never established when they're teaching the modes.
No.
No one ever talks about that. They only talk about the relationship between being in the key of A and playing in the key of C, and they call that a mode, right? You're really only playing your leads in another key that sort of dovetails with what A was.
Right.
It uses some of the same notes and some doesn't, right?
Right.
Like, there's always been a confusion among people that, you call them seventh. Well, which seventh?
Yeah.
Because we have a minor and a major of almost everything except the seventh. It's like we have the dominant seventh and then the major seventh. Well, what is the seventh,
Right.
You say, play A7. Well, wait a minute. Is that minor seven? No, it's a major chord with what would have been a minor seven note.
Yeah.
It's dominant seven.
Yeah.
So trying to explain that to somebody getting into it new, it's a little confusing to them. They just take it on blind faith. You tell them, oh, that's the blues chord. Okay, they're happy with that, right?
Right.
So those relationships are not always fully explained, and they don't have to be. But all of the music theory that we're talking about here, I don't think should be taught to a guy until he's actually a player.
Right.
He needs to be a player by ear completely, and then he needs to learn why he's playing what he's playing. You spoke before you learned how to read it.
Yeah.
You didn't instantly go to the books and start describing why PH has an F sound in a word, okay? Phonics. I mean, can you imagine?
Right.
They spell the word phonics, which is all about sound, and they spell it with a PH.
Right.
You'd think they would have wrote Phonics, right?
Yeah, one with the, yeah. Right.
And what son of a bitch ever put an S in the word lisp? It's almost like a joke.
Yeah.
So you want to be doing it first and very comfortable at it, and then you come along and go, that thing I'm doing, oh, they call it this. They call it the mode. Oh, wow, I didn't realize that. I've been doing that for years.
Yeah, it seems like that's...
Oh, they call it Dorian. Oh, I didn't know that. I've been doing that by sound for years.
Right.
That's how I played.
Yeah.
I thought that was the only A minor there was, right?
Yeah. And that when I wasn't writing stuff out in the early days, because tablature didn't... I didn't really know much about tablature, but if I was trying to learn a Steely Dan song, I was just trying to suss out what the chords were. So it wasn't until much later that I knew about these polychords or the mu major and all this kind of... I just knew, yeah, it's that song, it's Ricky Don't Lose That Number, or if it's in Green Earrings, but I had no idea until later. And it was like I would go back and put a Post-it note on and say, okay, well, that's what that is. But I remember Frank Zappa had said that one of the greatest unused resources that we have is the public library. He said there's so much stuff in the library. You just need to, forget about going to school and getting a degree in music. Just if there's things you want to find out.
Frank got that from Albert Einstein.
Yeah,
Albert Einstein that said, I only have to remember one thing, where the library is.
Right.
That's what he said.
Yeah.
That's a quote. And that's where Zappa got that.
Yeah.
He's reforming it into another way.
Right.
But now people walk around with the public library on their phone.
Right.
Consequently, and I don't have one of them, okay?
Right.
So consequently, because of that, that's their brain now. People carry their brain in their pocket.
Right.
They don't have to know anything anymore. They just ask the phone. There are repositories of huge amounts of information that are coming off of their phone.
Right.
I think that's awful.
Yeah.
I think that's not a good thing. In that case, it's not a good thing, because what happens is you lose the ability to be a critical thinker.
Yeah.
Just like flightless birds lose the ability to fly if the food is on the ground on their island.
Yeah.
People lose their ability to use their intellect. And intelligence has been defined accurately as problem-solving ability. Not just knowledge or memory, but the ability to solve problems on the fly. And that's described as what intelligence is. If you've trained yourself now to solve every problem by asking the phone, you'll still solve the problems because someone told you what to do. have the ability to do. Look at people who use GPS all the time. After a while, they can't get anywhere without one.
Right.
So you don't want to be doing that. I mean, like everything else, the phone or the internet or computers are very handy as tools. But you know what? If the only tool you ever have is a hammer, sooner or later everything looks like a nail.
Right, yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Music, we're talking about music here. How does that apply? Well, it's just the same thing because, John, everything we do, whether it's cooking or music or whatever, or rocket science, it's the same kind of rules in another application. You know?
Yeah.
Sound is circular, right? And if you struck a guitar string, it doesn't move back and forth. It moves in a circle, like the universe does. Everything follows the same rules. A sine wave, everyone knows what a sine wave looks like, drawn out on paper. Looks like that squiggly line like the weatherman shows you. What most people don't know, that a sine wave is simply a circle drawn out in a line.
Right.
If you draw a perfect circle on a piece of paper and then someone starts moving the paper, it forms a sine wave. And if as you're drawing your circle, you speed up and slow down as you go around, and he moves the paper, it'll be like a triangle wave. That's what'll happen.
Yeah.
So audio is simply the circular rule of the universe of compressing and decompressing air between the source and your hearing system. That's what audio is.
Yeah.
And that rule applies to audio, and it applies in electronics, and it applies if you're building something, it applies to mechanics, it applies to the rotation of a car. The rules are always the same, but applied differently. And if you know the rules of one, you can say, well, let's apply what we know about music to what we know about cars, or let's apply what we know about electronics to what we know about shipbuilding. And, you know, it comes back to the same rules.
Yes.
But unless you have the ability to critically think, you're going to have to rely on someone else to tell you what to do.
Right.
In this case, it's the phone.
Yeah, it does seem
Now,
like it's that whole butterfly effect that every action has a
yes.
equal reaction.
Yeah. Nothing new about that.
Yeah.
Just remember this, there's nothing really new. There's
Right.
just old things being told to you by new people.
Right. And I don't know a lot about electricity, but isn't that the whole idea between the alternating current thing, moving back and forth?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, in order to understand that, you have to understand what current is.
Right.
What do they mean, current? What does that mean? Why does it shock me? Why do I get a buzz when I touch it?
Right.
You know? So if you understand what's happening at the level of the electron, what current is, it's simply the movement of electrons from one atom to another. So if you look at the electron as being, and I know they picture it this way, but in actual mathematics, it's not. It's actually it's a formula, but we put it into pictures. We say there's a proton, and it's got little planets running around it, like you see all the time. The picture of the universal sort of electron, right?
Yeah.
Oh, this proton has 3 electrons. This one has 13. You know, and they tell you about valences and all the outside orbits. Well, let's keep it at that picture because it's easy to understand. If you were to remove the electron in one atom that has, you know, a bunch running around it, a proton with a bunch of electrons zooming around it, and you simply remove one, it becomes more positive than the one next to it, right? Because it's balanced. You debalance it by removing an electron. You've now created less electrons to it. It's now unbalanced. It's positively charged. Well, it starts magnetically pulling in the closest one from the next electron to fill the hole. And that leaves a hole behind it. And that pulls the next one from the next one. And that movement of current, of electrons from one to the next, is what we call electricity, current.
Right.
And because it's in motion, you feel it. Like you'd feel anything that was
Yeah.
But for the grace of God, could have been anybody.
Right. Yeah, it's true, and you never know. They always say you never know who's going to be in the audience when you're playing a particular game. But more importantly, if you're a sideman, you never know what could come down the road just by getting a good referral. You come off the road for 3 months, and somebody calls you and says, "Hey, Frank, I'm looking for a bass player," and you go, "Man, I've got a couple months open, and my guy is reliable and just a great."
That happens a lot, John.
Yeah.
That happens a lot.
Absolutely.
More often than you'd expect.
Yeah.
It's exactly what happens. That's how I got so many drummers.
Yeah.
And I've always got these great drummers. And they're usually great guys.
Yeah. Well, you have to. You have to have it.
My entire career of 50 years.
Yeah.
I've only ever asked one guy to leave.
Yeah.
That was it. Just one.
That's, man, what a blessing that's been. I mean, that's 90% of or a greater part of the people that you can, because it's, you're married to all those guys on the road.
And the guy that I said that to, he was like one of the best physical players.
Yeah.
But there's too much baggage.
Yeah. And there's just no room. There's no room for that on the road.
We don't need this. We're doing this I do this for fun.
Yeah.
I certainly don't do it for money. I never made any money in the music industry. I was never able to buy a house or anything.
Yeah.
So I don't do it for money. I do it for fun.
Right.
That's why I do it. And I've done it since I'm 14.
Yeah.
I'm 66 today.
Today's your birthday? Oh.
No, like today. In November I turned 60.
Oh, okay. Today. Oh, now okay. I thought you were saying you were turning 60. Okay.
So that's 52 years.
That's it. Yeah, that's a quite a accomplishment in any field.
That's a lot of fun.
That's a lot of fun that you had in 52 years.
Yeah, but there was, had its bad points. That's why I left the industry. Like the majors, that they call it, I left them in 82, 83.
Right.
I walked away. Everyone thought I was kidding, but I wasn't kidding.
Right.
I wouldn't make another deal with a major in a million years.
Right.
And I said that then, and I've kept it since now.
Yeah.
Because that was the unfun part.
Right.
It was like everything was great except for those guys.
Right. Well, it sounds like the period that you're talking about is like kind of when they were ushering in the whole MTV era of where everything that you did was based on the way it looked rather than the way it sounded.
Yeah, but that was starting to be a problem in the 70s. I mean, I spent almost every day having a fight with my record label.
Yeah.
And it just said, you know what, this is not worth it. Oh, yeah, but you're playing big buildings, and you're doing this, and you're doing that. I don't care. I'll play in big buildings. I'll play at home. I don't care. I really don't care. I have as much fun getting together, singing Old Lang Syne at a get-together with my family, sitting around a piano, and no one ever says, play your originals.
Right.
It's that type of situation. So yeah, it was getting a little bad, and then there was the whole festival thing, and how you had to be, and how you had to act, and it's not me, man. I'm a normal guy, I want to meet people, I want to hang out with them, I want to go to the parking lot and meet everyone after the gig. I don't want to sit around they want you to sit at a table and sign autographs and let people in as if you're visiting Santa Claus. What the heck is that all about?
Yeah.
That's so stupid. I mean, you feel dumb. I don't want to do that stuff.
Right.
I'm just the guy next door. I happen to be in a band that people got to know, but that doesn't make me any less the guy next door.
Right. And so there was...
maybe if I'd have gotten... Listen, maybe, I'll be honest, maybe if I'd have gotten rich, I'd have turned into a jerk. Who knows? I might have. But by the grace of God, I didn't make any money, so that kept me pretty normal. Thank God.
Yeah, I would say that the
I don't want to get in a limousine. Heck's that. Really? A limousine? Why are you getting in a limousine? In and out of a limousine?
Were there any opening? Did you? Speaking of that whole thing, it seems like that would have been very prevalent in the world of Kiss.
Well, everybody was getting in and out of limousines and stuff and acting like, they were the second coming. That's not to put them down. It's just that's the way everyone was.
Right.
That's what people did. But I didn't want to do it, so I was a bit of a maverick, if you say,
Yeah.
Oh, I got a reputation in the industry pretty early on. He's hard to work with. How many times did I hear that? He's hard to work with. What did that really mean? It meant from their perspective I was hard to work with. It meant that I didn't do or didn't want to do their version of what they thought I should be doing. But there's a very good reason why I didn't want to do what those people wanted me to do. It's not just because it was those people. It's because their ideas sucked. Okay? Like, they sucked.
Yeah.
I wasn't, think about, Hollywood has never been good at representing real things. But they think they are. So if you go back to the oldest days of Hollywood movies, for instance, everybody knows what the hippie movement really was. But if you ever saw a movie with the hippie movement, they thought it was guys in VW buses with flowers in their hair, and that isn't what it was. But it was Hollywood's version of what it was.
Right.
The Beatles were the Beatles, but Hollywood's version was the Monkees.
Right.
You see what I mean?
Yeah.
It's sort of the Beatles. But you have to have a Nehru collar and, have to act a certain way. It's not true. That's not what the Beatles were. It's some producer's version of it.
Yeah.
And so in the music industry, it was exactly the same thing. Hey, you should do this on your album cover. What, are you kidding? Where did you come up with this crap? Like, it was really bad ideas.
Yeah.
It's almost like, imagine if the record company came up to you in all seriousness, that this didn't happen, but let's imagine, to illustrate it, imagine if the record company guy comes up to you at a big gig and he goes, it would be really cool if you bounced on stage on a pogo stick. That's his idea of what he thinks he'd like to see as cool. And then he tries to convince you that it's hip and it's cool, and you're like, I think you don't really get this, pal.
Right.
Right? So that's sort of what was happening, whether it was the music, the timing of the songs, the way it was presented, the clothing, the covers, everything about it, how you do an interview, what do you do after the gig, what do you do before the gig, where do you sit, how do you look, how do you, be in what do you say or not say in an interview? I'll say anything in an interview because I'll say anything to you for sitting down with me or not in an interview. What's the difference? Why should I have to be two different people? I have enough trouble keeping up with one.
Right.
So this was Hollywood. This was the music industry's way of thinking they know best. And guess what? They're right most of the time. It does make more money. Their ideas do make more money. I'm not going to argue with that. But so did P.T. Barnum.
Yeah.
P.T. Barnum made a lot of money on penny tickets by saying it was the greatest show on earth. And what did he really have? A couple of bearded ladies in an ant farm? Some elephants? Greatest show on earth? Really? But if you tell people that enough, it's the greatest show. Oh, what a show. It's the greatest show. They begin to go, hey, I heard it's the greatest show. We're going to go.
Right. Yeah.
It's basically brainwashing. You know how you know you've been brainwashed by the radio?
How's that?
When you have a song and you say, I didn't like that song, but it grew on me. Kind of grew on me.
Right.
That's how you know you were brainwashed. It may not be a bad song either, okay? You could be brainwashed into liking a good thing too, right? But if it didn't hit you right away, it kind of grew on you, well, I think somebody made it grow on you, because if you hadn't heard it 50 times, it wouldn't have grown on you.
Right.
that really great tune that we just know. I heard a couple of tunes while I was driving that I literally had to pull over and stop and listen to them because they just hit me right away. They were so good.
Yeah.
And they weren't in the kind of music that I was even playing. That happens, you know. Some songs are just really, really get you right away.
Yeah.
You don't have to be brainwashed by them. You know that.
Right.
And like you said, a lot of that has to do with where you are at the time, who's your girlfriend, where are your parents. You know, those things happen. I hear old Beatle tunes today, and I can't help but associate them with a skating rink. That's where I used to sit in the skating rink,
Right.
you know, sitting in the stands with my friends while they were playing the latest Beatle tunes for the skaters.
Right.
You know?
Right.
I get that. There's that associative thing. But some of those are really, really good songs. And some songs grew on me. You know? And then some songs grow on you so much that they overgrow on you. And then you say, no, don't play that anymore. Like guys in bands, if I had $1 for everybody in a band that said he didn't want to have to play Brown Eyed Girl, I'd be rich.
Right.
Or Stairway to Heaven in a music store.
Right.
Those things do happen, you know?
Yeah.
You can have too much of a good thing. Because Brown Eyed Girl is actually a good tune, and so is Stairway to Heaven.
Right, yeah.
It's not that they're bad tunes. They're great tunes.
Yeah, it's just...
Sometimes it's a bit much, you know?
Right.
That happens.
Yeah.
Familiarity breeds contempt.
Absolutely.
But absence makes the heart grow fonder.
Right. Well, I'm hoping that somehow, some way things do, like you say, when it's convenient for the powers that be to let us begin living our lives again, that we'll be able to catch you at the Ludlow Garage here in Cincinnati. We're very excited about your show.
Well, I so much want to get back there because I always had great gigs in Cincy.
Yeah.
No matter where they were. Like I had some great times there.
Yeah.
The stadium gigs, the other gigs. I always thought it was a great place.
Yeah. The stadium gigs would have been the late 70s ish.
Yeah, late 70s, and then I played many times in other smaller places later in the 80s. And I always liked going to Cincy. Always fun.
Yeah, fabulous. Yeah,
we'd find a good restaurant, go somewhere.
Uh-huh.
If the Reds were playing, we'd watch them, something like that,
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we've got it on our radar, so I really appreciate you taking your time out this weekend to spend some time on the Guitar Hang podcast.
Well, I hope we've talked about all the things you wanted
absolutely.
to talk about.
Yeah,
I didn't think you on some kind of weird tangent that you were sorry you heard.
Not at all. We covered a lot of bases and a lot of really fascinating stuff. It's we went around the horn. It was great. It was.
You teach, right?
Yeah, I own Cincinnati Guitar School.
So let me ask you a question. You obviously meet a lot of guitar players.
Yeah.
What do you think guitar players will think if I were to put out my pedals or my amplifiers?
I think they would love it, especially if there was a forum for them to see you playing them and maybe you describing a little bit about them, like on a YouTube channel format, where it's either maybe some clips live playing them. I mean, maybe you could set up a camera during a sound check and talk about, or if it's in your home studio or wherever you create your pedals, and just a little bit of ideas about what you had in mind, what you were conceptualizing with these pedals. Well,
basically what I'd be doing is giving them what's on my DVD Live at the Agora.
Yeah.
That's sound. That's my sound. That's what they get.
Exactly. Yeah, so maybe
that's the best demonstration of it.
Yeah, so maybe interspersed with yeah, maybe you could reference that. This is the particular sound I was going for on this song. And you could have a link to that. Anything that where people could actually hear you using them and see you, to get an idea of how they're.
Well, the reason I'm asking you, John,
yeah,
is because I'm breaking news here. That you're the first person I'm telling it to publicly.
Oh wow, fabulous!
So that's breaking news.
That is breaking news. Well, the good thing is I've got some buddies that have a YouTube channel. That there's a guy named Pete Thorne that I've interviewed.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, I interviewed Pete for the Guitar Hang podcast, and I've got some other buddies that live in Dallas that do reviews of pedals and that sort of thing. That I'm sure they would love to purchase some of your pedals and review them and get them out, because even though it's probably hard from your perspective to appreciate, you're a very well-known and very respected, dare I say, loved player. So you may not have a full appreciation of that, but anybody that's a guitar player friend of mine definitely knows Frank Marino. So.
Well, I'm so glad to hear that, because that makes it all worth it.
Yeah.
It really, truly does. And you're right, I don't know that because I don't check.
Yeah, I mean, and yeah.
I'm the last guy. I don't go on Facebook. I don't go on social media. I do not check. I never read reviews. I haven't for 30 years. I have no idea what people are saying about me. When I found out that Johnny Winter spoke about me on camera, I couldn't believe it.
The players that
you didn't even know who I was.
Yeah. The players that I remember reading, it could be as recently as a year or two ago, or it could be as long as 10 or 15 years ago. There were players like Paul Gilbert, Zakk Wylde.
Zakk calls me a lot.
Yeah.
We're friends.
But yeah, those guys, and I always thought that was cool because, those are guys that are my age.
Frank Hannon, too, is a friend of mine.
Frank Hannon from Tesla. Yeah, exactly. Those kind of guys, very great players in their own right, but they're certainly...
Marty Friedman also.
Yeah, that was the other guy I was going to say, is Marty Friedman. But I think the thing that a lot of players appreciated is, while there was the blues and the rock influence, there was other things that you're mixing in there. So if anybody said, oh, you kind of remind me of Frank Marino, we kind of know what that means. Like, that means that you're taking a little bit of chances and introducing elements in what you're playing that may be slightly outside of the genre that you're playing in.
You know what my managers used to tell me?
What's that?
Which was a bone of contention. They used to say your albums and your guitar playing, everything about you, is like a box of mixed chocolates. And nobody likes mixed chocolates. They want cherries or nuts or whatever when they buy it. Now, from a buying standpoint, they're 100% right. But it's true. My music, my approach, my albums, they're very varied. You really can't tell. Is this guy playing jazz? Is he playing rock? Is he playing blues? What is he doing? Who is he? It's true.
Well,
I agree to that, but I think it's a good thing. I don't
right,
think it's a bad thing.
And the thing is, there's very few players that can do that, and when there are players that do that, for the rest of us that are looking for interesting things to be inspired, it twists our ear, because you might come in thinking, okay, this guy is going to sound like this, or I think because he's playing an SG, I think he's going to sound. And then you put the record on, you go, oh my God, I hear, wow, I was not expecting that. And that's exactly what I think 99.9% of the players that I know, we live for that. We want to hear the unexpected, or something that twists.
I agree with you, and that's why my approach is that. But try telling that to the business guys.
Oh, I know. Yeah, go
get a deal with somebody and try telling him that you want to make a record of 7 different styles.
Right.
We'll see if you get the deal.
Yeah.
You won't get the deal.
So while it might be great for commerce, it doesn't. What it doesn't do, it doesn't push forward the art of.
The art, yes. We owe it to the art.
Right.
To be true to it for the next generation.
So I think that guys like myself are very appreciative, because it make, especially younger impressionable players, they're like, well, I didn't know that you could do that within a blues. I didn't know that you could play West Montgomery octaves on that, or I didn't realize that you could do a diminished lick on the turnaround, or you can play a diminished scale over the 4 chord. Wow, that's really cool. You know, for if you've never heard that, it twists your ear. The first time I heard somebody do that, I was like, that is really now, to to jazz guys, that's like really basic stuff. But if you grew up as a blues-based player, the first time you hear somebody play a half whole step diminished thing, you're like, whoa, what the hell is that?
Right. I know, that's what happened when I did Kingby in the 70s.
Yeah, it's like, that's a really.
And you know who did that to me? You know who said that to me? I was at the office with Aerosmith and Nugent and I, you know, he was always like kind of pushy against everybody. Like he never, I always thought he didn't like me, you know, like this guy didn't like me, you know?
Right.
And so one day I was in David's office and Kingby had come out, my live album, and he gets on the phone with David and he said he was listening to this song and all of a sudden he heard this amazing jazzy blues thing in this blues song. When he found out it was Marino, he got out of the car and started screaming, "Oh no!" You know? Because that was my approach at the time. It was like, yeah, why not put that stuff into music? That's supposed to be there, right?
Yeah.
You're supposed to spell it out that way.
Well, you know, a guy that kind of fell into them, a different genre of music, but just had a hell of a time dealing with the record companies because he wanted to do so many different things, was Danny Gatton. I mean,
sure, yeah, I know that story. Sure,
yeah, I mean, and it drove him nuts. I mean,
my drummer, ex-drummer, became his drummer at the time when he died.
Oh wow, okay. Yeah, so I mean, that's guys like yourself and Danny and so many other players that have a lot of interest. I mean, you don't want to be put in any box. That's not what art is. You don't want to be, you know, I know it's great for record sales, but it's not great for art.
Well, the proof is that the bands that did stick to that formula, they did make the most money when they stuck to the one thing. AC/DC, I mean, you can't imagine a jazz tune on their album. Right? So, and not just rock, artists. If you go right back to Sinatra was Sinatra, you know? It was always one style on the record, one style. And that's what sold. So it's true. Commercially, it is true that if you stick to one thing, you're more likely to become rich.
Right.
But if you really believe you owe it to the art to take it further, you're probably going to sacrifice the money and maybe gain the respect.
Right.
And I'm okay with that. I really am. Like, no regrets at all about the money.
Right. Yeah, and in the end, it's about, you know, being true to what, you know, what...
I was raised like that long before as a musician. My parents were, you know, Italian and Syrian, you know, like very sort of different kind of culture. And with them, it wasn't what was money, you know, so what, you know, it was like the family, as long as everything was the family and, you know, we're poor, but we don't have to be rich because we eat, you know? We were raised that way. So it's not special. It's just, yeah, to you, it's the normal way of doing things. So what if you don't get $1 million? You didn't need it before. Why would you need it after?
Right. Yeah.
So, yeah, I get it. I'm glad you teach with the thoughts that you're having and the way you're looking at it. You obviously agree with some of what I'm saying. I'm glad you're a teacher because a lot of teachers don't do that, man. I'm telling you.
Well, you know, then on the flip side, because the reason I got started playing music was I was 100% inspired and influenced by David Gilmour. I performed with a Pink Floyd tribute group called Signs of Life, the American Pink Floyd. So doing that is much more like theater than it is a rock and roll band because everything is very, very, very choreographed and we're representing 50 years of a particular artist. So it's not the same thing, but it's very satisfying on another level, but it's not there's not creativity involved in as much as improvisation. There are some spots to improvise, but generally when you've got click tracks that are running the video and the lights and all that other kind of stuff, you don't really have flights of fancy where you can intersperse John Scofield licks, you know.
Right.
So
Right.
I like both. I like them both very much.
Yeah, I can do both too. I agree with that. Everything's got its place and everything's got its value. You know, I say this all the time. The answer that I say to everything is yes, but. In other words, everything's yes, but what are the details? What is the application? It only becomes no if the application becomes ridiculous.
Right.
I'm not going to say no to something. Yeah, sure, let's check it out. I'm the guy that spent every cent he ever had to make a record as an advance from a record company was spent experimenting on things that didn't work.
Yeah.
You know, like 99% of those experiments in the studio made me a great producer, it made me a great engineer, but 99% didn't work, and you're making a list of all the things that didn't work. But that's just as valuable as all the things that did work.
This has been the Guitar Hang Podcast, episode number 6 with Frank Marino. Thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in, and we'll see you very soon.